Many of us have been enjoying our first, second, third, or fourth playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3. Some of us may even be brave enough to attempt honor mode in Baldur's Gate 3.
Take this shit, or Shario will have your head.
But what do you do when you have finished this RPG? What else could you go play right now that maybe doesn't meet the same level as this RPG, but are still damn good games, even if some of them are a bit older? I've got 5 RPGs for you to revisit or try for the first time in 2024 as you await the next iteration of the next great RPG. And while some of these are going to be obvious choices, other ones perhaps not so much. I tried to give you kind of a mix of RPGs. First, we must return to the RPG that for so long was considered the best RPG for me that I have ever played. One that was knocked off its pedestal by Baldur's Gate 3 after years and years of looking down at us from the high spot through grinning with bloody teeth.
Ask me later, perhaps. Maybe I'll change my mind. This is not something small you're asking, after all.
Dragon Age Origins is a stellar RPG with real-time pause combat that will feel like a faster-paced version of Baldur's Gate 3. But you can pause as often as you want and set up skills to go off, adding a similar tactical element. The combat itself is fun, but where DAO really shines is going to be in its companions that rival even Larian's own for their emotional depth, complexity, and romantic interest. Dragon Age as a series has spawned many a fanfiction due to its characterization, and one of the places you'll really see it step up is in the party banter. There are tons of voice lines between your characters just as you run about the game. They interact with each other, making the game come to life.
You're not even listening to me.
My, you are smarter than you look after all. Your Chantry must have been very proud.
If you haven't played DAO yet, this is a good sign to pick it up. It's available on consoles and PC. Just be aware that on PC there's some issues with crashes, and you can actually save yourself some hassle if you, instead of going through Game Pass, which actually routes through EA's launcher, just get it directly on Steam if you can, because then there's less friction between you and the game. That's what I found, because I actually have it on both, and I found it easier to run it on Steam. And there are ways to actually migrate your save files as well if you had started on one or the other. So just avoid all that extra frustration. Instead, channel all your frustration into Alistair running the wrong way when he's supposed to be tanking. But if you're looking for something a little bit more like home for players of Baldur's Gate 3, look no further than Larian's game that preceded it. Divinity Original Sin 2 was a hit for Larian in its own right, and one that BG Thrans will feel right at home with in the combat to the world itself. It is a bit more difficult, for a couple different reasons, especially combat-wise, so just keep that in mind. Divinity Original Sin 2 is Larian's own IP, and as such, it has some interesting little quirks, like the fact that elves can experience memories by eating the flesh of the fallen. A bit more of a gruesome version of Speak with the Dead, I guess. There's a ton of similarities here, from the origin characters to status effects, but if you're like me, you'll probably feel like Baldur's Gate 3 refined the combat of Divinity in several key ways. For example, there's a bit of a cumbersome system that utilizes 2 armor types, physical and magic, If you're looking for an easier playthrough, it often benefits to specialize your party toward one of these armor types, but there's also a ton of freedom and quirkiness in the game, like the fact that you can heal your rattling bones as an undead character with poison. And in true Larian fashion, you get plentiful degenerate romance options like the overbearing lizardman Red Prince, the angsty Ifan, who's got surprising depth for a human, and the same human remains eating elf assassin from before. Just keep in mind that this was done before all the cinematics, so don't expect the depth of emotion and the depth of the romances that you had in Baldur's Gate 3. It's not quite that extensive, so don't go in there expecting that and getting disappointed. I don't think there's any game out there that has quite the same emotional depth through like the myriads of cinematics. There's a couple that come close, like a Mass Effect, but other than that, one sometimes underutilized, under-talked about thing that is in Divinity Original Sin 2 that actually doesn't exist in Baldur's Gate 3 is the dungeon maker, the dungeon, like basically allowing you to be a virtual DM. It's actually one of the first ways I found out about Larian Studios and this game, because I really enjoyed watching Matt Mercer of Critical Role go through a whole campaign on Divinity Original Sin, like a crafted, created campaign. So if you're looking for something with a little bit more freedom to create your own homebrew version, check out Divinity Original Sin for that as well. Quick me from the future. I was actually going through editing on this video, and I really wanted to single out some games I kind of touch on here, but ones that I don't think I gave quite enough oomph to them. So I talk here in the next couple of minutes about Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2, and I mentioned in brief Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2. I really want to put out here that if you enjoy the world of those games, and you want a little bit more of that, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and 2 are a little bit of, I would say, underrated games. They're games I loved as a kid, and they're just very solid games. They are more action oriented, they're gonna be a bit more spammy, and they're really designed around being co-op, so you'll find that, you know, having a lack of companions kind of sucks. But they are ported to PC. They're ported to PC back in 2020 and 2021, I believe. And they're not like remasters, they're literally just ports of the game, but they're solid. They're really good games with very engaging stories that I think if you can just kind of let yourself get into it, you'll feel they're a rewarding RPG experience that many people don't actually get to play. I think a lot more people played the original, like the mainline Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, or even Neverwinter. Try out Dark Alliance 1 and 2 if you have the opportunity to. I think you'll enjoy it. Now, our next option is obvious. It's perhaps even more obvious than the Divinity Original Sin 2 one. I do promise there's going to be some towards the tail end of this list that are a bit more unexpected. But if you really wanted to romance Jaheira and you just didn't get the opportunity in Baldur's Gate 3, maybe try out the first two games. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are perfect if you want to expand your lore of BG3 and really get to know characters like Minsk and Jaheira. You've got to go back to where they came from. BG1 and 2 are older games and they do show their age. Oddly enough, back when these games were new, I was actually much more partial to Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and 2, a more action-oriented console RPG. But there's no replacing the games that brought us BG3 in the first place. They will play differently, but the world will be familiar, and enhanced editions available on PC help make the games feel a little bit less, well, old. Side note, and I just gotta put this out there as a huge fan of these games myself, they are different. You're not gonna see a lot of crossover and companions and things like that, but Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and 2 are also been ported over from console to PC back in like 2020 and 2021. Those games stand up. They're still very solid games. So if you're looking for a different experience, maybe try out Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and 2. Not the more recent Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance. That's a different thing, but there's 4 older games that you could potentially try. BG1, BG2, Dark Alliance 1, Dark Alliance 2. Number 4 is going to be a favorite of many of my friends who really, really love D&D. Solasta, Crown of the Magister. Solasta is an interesting game to list because from both when I played and from the experience of others I've talked to, the main appeal has been the combat, which is very much like in line with turn-based D&D. It's based off of Dungeons & Dragons 5e, much like BG3, though of course you'll find some differences, some quirks. I haven't finished Solasta, but the time I did spend in the RPG, I definitely enjoyed the combat. It just felt good. If you like Baldur's Gate 3's combat, I think you'll be very happy with Solasta's tactical turn-based D&D combat. I didn't get, like me personally, I didn't get as engaged in the story. I think in some ways this might be one of those games that there's less about the story and more about just the mechanics and the enjoyment and the world itself. But I mean, some people enjoyed the story too, so keep that in mind. It's not a bad story or anything. It just didn't grab me personally. Number 5 is going to be 2 games. I'm cheating again because it's 2 games. I already did 4 for one point. Why not just do 2? We're gonna talk about Fable and Kingdoms of Amalur. They are both console-based RPGs that were ported to PC. That means they play like a console RPG with more action-oriented combat. That's much more fast-paced and less strategic than the lengthy turn-based combat of Baldur's Gate 3. They're also both full of irreverent humor, consequence, and an interesting, engaging story. That's kind of where their similarities end though. While Fable is RPG royalty at this point, despite a few poor entries in the series, and even has a new iteration of the long-standing RPG coming in the next couple years, Kingdoms of Amalur was assembled from an all-star cast, but drowned underneath scandals from its developers and publisher until it was eventually sold off and re-released years later with a brand new DLC. In the case of both RPGs, you're likely to find a more approachable adventure, but one that will be memorable and fun. I strongly recommend picking up both of these RPGs for a faster paced story-driven RPG that has lots of choice and consequence that is a bit, I guess, lonelier, because you don't have a Jaheira, you don't have a Karlach, you don't have a Fane. Well, lonelier. But, hey, there is one thing you can do. You can kick chickens. And this is where I would like to end here. I was going to include a 6th bonus one in this list. I was going to include Pathfinder, but I actually haven't played that game, Wrath of the Righteous. I want to play it first before recommending it, so I'm going to jump in after playing a bit more Solasta, and then I'd be more willing to say something about it. But I want to know what you think down in the comments below. What RPG would you suggest? Or are any of these ones that you would really like hone in on as being a good one for people to play? Obviously the Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Divinity Original Sin 2 are kind of like go-tos. But what ones would you suggest that are not on the list? Let us know down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Redbeard Flynn, and I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.